So anyways, this is lecture 2. Hopefully we're going to get into subdomains, a little bit of terminal stuff, choosing hosting companies. I'm going to give some recommendations there. How to get set up and running, get your files over. We're going to talk a little bit about FTP, why we shouldn't use it, a little bit about secure FTP through SSH, maybe a little bit of SSL. Formally introduce some stuff I just skimmed over last time, and we're going to do a very simple HTML file from a Photoshop template. We might get into PHP, I don't think so though. So moving on, the terminal is basically the SSH console which runs on Linux. If you have a Mac, if you ever open up your terminal, these commands all work. This is Linux. Top is kind of your command line task manager, equivalent of Windows. So if I go to something like PuTTY here and show you a little bit about the terminal. So let's SSH in here as me. And so that you can see the screen, I'm going to move the font up a little bit. So 18 should be good. Open this up. That OK that I said OK to is basically a security prompt, and it says that I haven't logged into the system before. So once you log into any system, you usually get some sort of message of the day that tells you a little bit about the server that you connect to if your admin's good. But anyways, just to show you what the commands do, ls means list of directory. So basically this here is my home directory. Why do I know that? That symbol there called the tilde means your home directory. CD, change directory to, let's say, slash. Slash is your root directory. It's the base of any Linux-based system. So moving on, there's pwd, which will tell you what your current working directory is. Typically when you're working on the web, you're going to be under public HTML under your home directory. So tilde/public HTML. Something that you're going to find very useful is tab completion. So if you type in command and you don't quite know it or you don't quite feel like typing it in or whatever, if you hit tab, it'll usually guess for you what it is, which is really great. So anyways, there are other commands on my slide, but basically you can read through them and see what they do. I'm sure that Wikipedia has a lot of fun stuff. One thing I didn't say is ... That's the directory above or the parent directory. So if you want to traverse up the directory tree, you would use ... Zip, really useful command. When I'm working with big installations like WordPress or PHP bulletin board, there's usually about 5,000 files there, and for whatever reason, when you're using FTP, that 5,000 files takes forever to upload. So I typically do is I'll zip up that directory on my local computer, upload it to the server by FTP or whatever, and then I'll unzip it directly on the server. If I want to make a complete backup of my home directory, I go the exact opposite way, where I'll zip up the file on the server and unzip it on my own machine. So something that's sort of helpful here. So moving on, network tools. I decided I was going to get a little bit into networking today just because it's really helpful for when your site's down and you don't know what's going on and you're trying to figure out if it's you or someone else. ISPs typically have problems with each other once in a while. They're called pairing relationships, to where, let's say, level 3 is in conflict with your ISP Comcast. If level 3 is the data center's provider and you're on Comcast and they're having a dispute together, you're not going to get to your website. So there's a tool called Traceroute, which is really helpful. And basically what it does is it tells you every single hop that it takes to get from your computer through the ISP's network to the remote network. And if there's a problem with any part of the network path that you're taking to get to your provider, where your server is, it'll time out and it'll give you errors with traceroute. So it's a very useful tool. I use it all the time, especially as a system admin, but I found being a hosting company, and even as a person using other hosting companies, it does help me out if my website happens to be down for some reason. Permissions are another thing that you're definitely going to deal with. Yes?
Is there a man-page for traceroute?
Yes.
Thank you.
Sometimes it's traceRT, but it's traceroute, Google, I'm sure will find lots of stuff about it. So permissions, I just put down the table and I associate the 0 with the binary value of it. Permissions are basically 3 numbers, 0 or 1, and they stand for read, write, execute, and each number then goes into your local user, your group user, and your world user. So typically when you see permissions, you're going to see something like 755, which is the typical permission for a web server. Some web servers like mine are configured where you can use 644, which is a little tighter, a little more secure. That's actually PHP if you're curious. But basically, for each permission value, if you use 7, that means that everyone can read, write, and execute for whatever permission is 7. So if it's 755, that means that you can read, write, and execute on your file. That means the group can read and execute the file, and the world, or everyone on the server, can also read and execute your file. A little tip that I didn't learn late into the game was your home directory. If you chmod to 700 to block everyone from getting into your home directory, you'll also end up blocking the web server from getting there. A way to allow the web server to get into your directory, but at the same time block everyone else from reading your directory, a great permission for your home directory would be 711, which allows the web server to get in if it knows where the files are. So moving on, DNS. DNS is used to resolve domain names. So it converts google.com into some IP address. If you think about the Postal Service, I'm not sure if I went into this last time, but basically, the Postal Service has 4499 Humphrey Road, Great Valley, New York. 14741 is my address in the United States. And then they can figure out where I live from that address. Well, IP addresses are the same way on the internet, and they tell you where you're at on the internet. So routers kind of broadcast, or parts of the internet tell everyone where they are so that an IP address can be routed. But humans don't like remembering numbers, because an IP address like 64.85.172.184 is difficult to remember. Famousto.com is very easy to remember. So DNS converts famousto.com into the IP address. A great service to use is DNSExit. Basically, their service is redundant with 4 global servers. If you have DNS in one location, single point of failure, and you have 30 systems that rely on that one domain, 29 of the systems are up, but the DNS is down, everything is down. And I've actually ran into that a few times, so I allow DNSExit to host some of my DNS stuff that needs mission critical uptime so that all my systems are reachable, even if my central DNS happens to be down. CPL also has a built-in DNS manager, and that DNS manager, give me a second here, and I will show you what it looks like. It's basically the same thing, and it can also be just as redundant. So, moving into cPanel. Hopefully Internet Explorer doesn't choke on me. And I actually remembered the password from last time. Go figure, right? So, if you go into DNS settings, or Advanced DNS Zone Editor, click on your domain. It brings up this wonderful wizard, and then it gives you lots and lots of directories. We're going to explain what the types of records are. You might see A and C name over here, and you might see the 600. But basically, here's where subdomains and domains kind of come into play. So usually you have your main domain, famousco.com, and then under it you might have several subdomains. Subdomains are basically something in front of your domain that points to a server. So the difference between subdomains and directories is, directory will come after the domain, and all it relies on is the domain to get an IP address. But if you create a subdomain, you can actually send it to another server, or you can have something else handle that domain. So for example, cPanel could point to something totally different than what FTP could point to. A lot of companies like putting their FTP servers and their cPanel servers and all sorts of servers on different boxes that have different addresses on the internet, because that helps load balance everything and keep your website up for longer. Notice how everything has an IP address that's exactly the same. That's actually the real IP address for famousco.com. But basically, that's what DNS is. It just resolves the domain into an IP address. Time to life, or TTL, means how many seconds you can cache this record on your local machine before it becomes invalid. So if you've ever read somewhere that it takes 24 to 48 hours typically for something to go around the internet and become valid from the domain register, that's because their records typically are 86,400 seconds, which is equivalent to a day. Sometimes it's even more, but it's usually 86,400. So you have your time to life of 600 on my website, because I like changing records quite often, and I don't care if you have to go to my server 30 times to get all the